Now at 5:30, small craft advisory all day long here on NBC4. We've been alerting you about safety concerns on the water. It's a story you will only see on News 4.
And now at 5, our consumer investigation continues with the stories of two families impacted by boating accidents and who are now pushing for change. Susan Hogan is working for you with this special report. Susan?
Well, before we tell you what our investigation found, we want to introduce you to a Florida mom who would give anything for you to have met her little boy. But 3 years ago, 7-year-old Ryan died in a horrific boating incident. The family refuses to call his death an accident. July 17th, 2014 started out like any summer day.
We all loved being on the water.
The Batchelder family gathered together along the shore of Lake Burton in Georgia.
Well, we were commenting earlier that day that it was like heaven there.
A possible foreshadowing for what was about to happen.
Did Ryan love boating? Did he love being on the boat?
He loved being on the water. His room is actually decorated in the nautical theme, ironically.
At the family's home in Lake Worth, Florida, Meg walked us through Ryan's short life in pictures. One of her favorites, this photo. Teethy grin from ear to ear, still wet from a plunge in Lake Burton.
This picture was taken just a couple days before the accident.
The last time Meg saw Ryan alive, he was climbing on board this 2000 Malibu Response LX with his brother, cousins, and uncles. According to a police report, all 4 kids were sitting in the front of the boat. The driver was going in a circle to create waves to splash the kids in the bow. When the boat hit one of the waves, the bow took on a lot of water, and Ryan and his cousin were ejected out of the vessel. The driver, according to the police report, immediately put the vessel in reverse. When they realized Ryan was missing, the driver jumped in the water to look for Ryan and found him stuck in the propeller. Ryan died from his injuries. Ryan's mom and dad watched this horrific scene from shore.
The first night, you're just thinking that it's impossible to survive. So you're thinking about how you'll end it.
But over time, Meg knew she needed to find a purpose to move forward and to give her little boy a legacy. His love for stuffed animals is the inspiration behind Little Hugs, a foundation that donates stuffed animals to children going through hardships.
It's my way of continuing my relationship with Ryan, and he was such a loving boy. And it's just my way of putting his love out into the world that he wasn't able to do here in person.
His tragic accident hitting close to home for a California family. In 2006, Nikki Bell was close to graduating from college. This happy, playful 22-year-old from Paradise, California, was looking forward to a full life. But while on a boat with her friends, Nikki's world came to a sudden stop. In a bizarre twist of fate, a passenger on the boat captured these images of the moment the bow started to swamp. You can see Nikki actually trying to hang on, but in the final shot, she's gone. Nikki was washed overboard and hit by the propeller, struck 4 times in the head.
I know that you don't remember much about. Do you remember anything about your accident?
No.
Nikki is now 34 years old. She and her family agreeing to their first television interview since the accident.
Yeah.
As a family, how has this changed you, Mom or Dad? Can talk.
You guys are both going to cry.
Go there.
In what way? It's changed a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's something you wouldn't wish on anybody.
Today, Nikki is blind in one eye and has a severe brain injury from multiple skull fractures. A propeller from the boat struck her with such force, she lost a part of her frontal lobe.
Well, it just sucks because I can't see out of my left eye. I can't taste, can't smell. I can't drive. And it's like, I'm freaking 34 years old. I want to drive. I want to do my own thing.
In 2011, a jury found Mastercraft primarily at fault for the accident. The driver of the boat was found 20% responsible. The Bells argued the design of Mastercraft's X45 boat was defective and the company didn't adequately test it.
You assume that a company that puts out a product is any company is going to test their product before they put it out to the consumers.
The jury awarded Nikki $30 million. In a statement to News 4, Mastercraft said, in part, the boat was not defective in design or manufacture. The accident which injured the plaintiffs in that case was unsafe operation of the boat. Mastercraft appealed the verdict, but ultimately settled the case without admitting liability. Mastercraft said it did not make any specific changes in its products as a result of the case. Ryan's parents have now filed a lawsuit against Malibu, claiming the company manufactured a boat which contains safety defects and failed to adequately test its Malibu Response LX bow rider to ensure that it performed safely. In a statement to News 4, Malibu told us it is truly saddened by the tragic loss of a young child. However, the company maintains the boat the Batchelders had rented was used 14 years with no problems. In fact, after the investigation was complete, the company even told us the boat was rented again on 2 occasions without incident. Depositions in Ryan's case have begun, and News 4 obtained several of them. Malibu's current CEO testifying that safety is their #1 priority.
In our design and in our manufacture, absolutely. And I think our track record is just absolutely exemplary in the numbers of boats, people, hours that we have had without an incident.
So we wanted to know more about the regulations around these boats. You may think a government agency is watching closely over boat manufacturers and rigorously testing new boat designs, but we found that's simply not the case. The surprising findings of our consumer investigation ahead for you at 6. 80 million boats are on the water in the United States. In the summer, it's a rite of passage for people of all ages. But this lawsuit is exposing potential weaknesses in the boating industry, questioning who is designing these boats and actually testing them. Ryan Batchelder's family from Lake Worth, Florida, is suing Malibu Boats, claiming negligence. They say the 2000 Response LX the family rented at a lake in Georgia 3 years ago had a defective design, which led to their son's death.
I thought we were in a safe situation. I mean, obviously there's inherent dangers in boating.
News 4 obtained several videotape depositions in the case, including former CEO and founder of Malibu, Robert Alkema, who retired from the company in 2009.
Cut a hole in the deck and we tried it, tested it.
Alkema described how the company created the Response LX in 1996 by simply cutting a hole in the deck of another model and adding seats to the bow.
Was that a concern when Malibu decided to add bow seats to the Response and make it the Response LX that, hey, now we're going to have weight in the front of the boat that we don't have on the Response boat? Was that a topic of discussion?
That was a primary concern, yeah.
Okay. Why was that a concern?
Because there's more weight in the front than when it was originally designed, yeah.
Despite the concern, Alkema testified that no engineering adjustments were ever made.
And what efforts were made to counteract or deal with that proposed concern?
It was tested thoroughly.
Malibu employees, including Alkema, did take the Response LX on the water to test it.
I did the testing. I had one of those boats.
But Alkema testified that at that time, it wasn't Malibu's practice to follow any formal guidelines when testing boats, and the only proof of testing?
The evidence would be our experience and our recollection. There are no test documents that I'm aware of.
Okay. Those no longer exist?
I don't know that they ever existed.
In a statement to News 4, Malibu's attorney says the company's boats are designed and tested prior to sale to their customers, and the company has produced 50,000 boats since 1982. While pouring through thousands of pages of depositions in Ryan's case, we came across this. Another lawsuit against a different manufacturer. The family in this case also blaming a defective design and inadequate testing, this time by Mastercraft. News 4 flew out to Sacramento, California to meet Nikki Bell. In 2006, Nikki was riding in the bow of a boat when it became swamped. She was washed overboard and struck by the propeller. As you can see, she has lifelong injuries, including a severe brain injury.
They disrupted my life.
In 2011, a jury found Mastercraft 80% at fault in that accident, with the driver of the boat 20% responsible. Nikki was awarded $30 million.
What really horrified the jurors on our case was that the fact that MasterCraft did zero engineering, no testing of the boat at all relative to the weight that they said was fine and the number of people, and nothing about the performance of the boat.
MasterCraft appealed the verdict and ultimately settled the case without admitting any liability. In a statement to News 4, MasterCraft said, in part, the boat was not defective in design or manufacture, and the boat met or exceeded all standards promulgated by the U.S. Coast Guard and the American Boat and Yacht Council. We learned during our investigation that manufacturers testing their own boats is a standard and accepted practice. In fact, the government, including the Coast Guard, has very little involvement in how recreational boats are designed and tested. We asked the Coast Guard for an interview. They declined our request. But we can tell you that most of the Coast Guard's authority when it comes to these boats revolves around safety equipment that's required on board and law enforcement.
Why isn't the Coast Guard looking at this from a safety standpoint?
Safety expert Sean Kane says it's troubling how boats, unlike cars, are manufactured with very few regulations.
A lot of it's very much seat of the pants, and because there's no federal oversight, and because organizations, the industry organizations, don't have enough standards in place either, and they're voluntary, you end up with safety problems like this.
Now, our investigation is not over. There are some checks and balances when it comes to designing and testing these boats. Trade organizations are setting the standards, and most manufacturers say they follow them. But safety experts are warning those standards are voluntary. Tonight on News 4 at 11, we took those concerns right to one of the largest trade groups, what they had to say about your safety on the water. Probably the last thing you're thinking while joyriding on a boat is whether it's safe. You may believe the boating industry is highly regulated by the federal government, but our consumer investigation learned that's just not the case. In fact, most of the Coast Guard's authority when it comes to recreational boats revolves around safety equipment that's required on board and law enforcement.
In fact, the federal regulations are very scant. There's very little enforcement, and you have trade organizations who are setting guidelines that are voluntary.
Kane is referring to the American Boat and Yacht Council, or ABYC. Boat manufacturers can pay a small fee to become a member, which allows them to promote their products as using ABYC standards. Other trade organizations also offer voluntary certifications and standards as well. Safety experts, though, have a big problem with this.
The industry sets their own standards. Are they really pushing the envelope? Are they ensuring that the safety of their users are first and foremost, or is it really about what's easiest and what's the bottom line?
News 4 took our investigation on the water with John Adey, president of the ABYC.
Organizations like ABYC come and they fill in the blanks where the industry and the boaters and everyone else feels that they need to add some more robustness to those regulations.
To drive home his argument, John points to this. That smaller book on the left, that's your federal rules and regulations for recreational boats. The one on the right, that's the ABYC's standards. But one big difference, their standards are voluntary.
That argument around policy is interesting because voluntary standards, how do you know they're being met? And who's really checking on them? And are they robust enough?
There is an organization inspecting boats before they're sold. It's the National Marine Manufacturers Association, or NMMA. But we've learned the only ones taking these boats out and actually testing them in real-life situations are the manufacturers. Do they have to document all of this?
Well, there's no one that requires that they do other than the fear of a lawsuit or the fear of losing a customer.
Bottom line, John says he's not comfortable leaving the safety of your family to the federal government.
Because we're a nonprofit, we can react so quickly to changes in manufacturing, to advances in technology, to safety issues that we see come up. We can standardize that so quickly.
If you own a boat or are planning to rent one soon and want to see if it was built to those voluntary standards you just heard about, we have links for you. So just go to our NBC Washington app and search Small Craft Advisory. While you're there, be sure to watch our other stories we aired throughout the day.